And look at that. And we're live and we're on air. And I'm Ed Parcaut, one of the hosts. I want to give a shout out to Matt, Mohawk Matt, who's not here today. He's having some medical issues and we wish him well. And my special guest today, or co host, I should say, Amy. She's going to be more of a host from here going forward because we always need more hosts. Amy T. Meyer. Amy, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
No, it's no longer having you. You're part of the show. You got to step up. All right. All right. And today's guest is Tom Brown. And I don't want to tell everything about his story, but I was interviewing his wife, I think a couple weeks ago for my pod. Actually, she interviewed me for her live, and then I interviewed her for my podcast. And I heard some stories about you, about your service. And I thought you would be a really good candidate for the show because I'm sure you have some great stories, or any story is good for us. All right. So it doesn't have to be great. But you were, I think you got in during the Vietnam War, and then you were in for about 26 years. I don't want to tell the whole story, right? Kind of. So it's a little different time back then, and I thought it would be a great to know is I didn't know the whole story regarding my dad and my uncle. I knew they were in the Vietnam. I knew they were in the Air Force, and then my dad passed away when I was 12 of hairy cell leukemia from Agent Orange because he was a mechanic on airplanes. So and then my stepdad, he was a Marine, and I never knew his story, and I never knew my stepfather, my grandfather, Norman, who was in World War II, didn't know his story till I went to breakfast about a month ago, and I ran into my stepdad, and I was telling him about this show, and he's like, oh, let me tell you my story, right? And he's telling me he was in Vietnam, he got blew up, had some shrapnel, they were going to send him home. He's like, I don't want to go home. I want to stay here. And then they ended up sending him to Camp Pendleton. He's like, I want to go back. I don't want to be here. This is horrible. I want to go back. So that's why I like this show, because it tells different stories of people's transitioning out of the military, different times that they were in the military. And then we're here to help them transition throughout life, whatever they need. So that's my little spill. Anything you want to add to that, Amy?
No, I think it's just great because I think how we transition just makes a big impact on our next steps.
I think so too. So Tom, why did you pick the great service of the United States Navy?
Well, quick synopsis. I quit school when I was 16, and I started rodeoing when I was about 14, and I was 17, about ready to turn 18, of course. And the Navy recruiter called me and said, you know that you're going to be at the top of the heap for the draft. And so I went and talked to my father, and he said, look around at your heroes and see where they are today. And I looked around, and they, bull riders and everybody else that was rodeoing, broken down, 2 kids living in a trailer. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not where I wanted to be. So when the Navy recruiter called me, I said, okay, I'll come in. And that was probably my last civilian decision for the next 26 years.
What did you go in as?
I went in as an E1.
No, I mean, what was your MOS, or what did you?
Oh, none.
You're a boatsman?
Sir?
What did you do for your job? Were you a boatsman mate? What was your job?
No. I went to boot camp. We took the testing and stuff. And for some reason, I scored rather high in math and some of the sciences. And they sent me to aviation electronics school in Memphis, Tennessee after boot camp. And from there, I kind of sort of always wanted to fly. But I knew I couldn't fly as a pilot or co-pilot. But anyway, the opportunity came up for me to go to a squadron after A school, a squadron called Airborne Early Warning Squadron 1 in Guam. And they were known as the Typhoon Trackers. So I went there, went through training and stuff, and became an air crewman on the old Willie Victors, or WC-121 aircraft. You would know them as the Super Constellations, 4 engines, triple tail. And it just went on from there. Then we started deploying to Chu Lai, Vietnam. and we go there 2 weeks out of every 5 or 6, and then another crew would come in and relieve us, and we go back to Guam and go fly around in typhoons. So, and then after that, I went back to school in Memphis for an advanced course in aviation electronics, and was assigned to. I didn't want to go to a carrier, so I said, "What else is available?" And they said, "Well, how about Cameron Bay?" I said, "Where is Cameron Bay?" And they said, "In Southeast Vietnam." I said, "Well, they have by this time I think, an E5 by this time. So they got to have an NCO club that has beer, which the carriers don't have." So I went there and did a year and 2 months there, and came back to the States, and later on received a commission at LDO. It's called Limited Duty Officer in the Navy. You know what that is. And it just had worked for some great people. Even when I was waiting for my first school, there was a black chief that ran anybody that knows anything about the military knows that when you're waiting for something, they put you to work doing something you don't particularly want to do. So I was in building support, which meant buffing decks for offices and things like that, buffing, mopping, cleaning, buffing.
I've seen that in movies. I kind of understand that.
Anyway, and so the second class that worked for the chief came down. He came up to me one day and said, "The chief wants to talk to you." And I cannot remember his name because I only knew him as chief.
Right.
That you weren't allowed to know names. Anyway, I went down and said, walked in the office, knocked on the door. I said, "Chief, you want to talk to me?" And he says, "Yeah." This was on Friday, and I just know I'm supposed to have the weekend off, and I know it's some kind of duty. That's what's in my mind. So walked in the door, and he said, "Monday morning, do you know where the education building is?" And I said, "No, Chief, but I can find it." He said, "Well, find it. Be there at 8 o'clock in the morning." And he had set me up for the GED test out of nowhere. And I passed it. Excuse me. And it kind of went on from there. It was, to me, it's a remarkable story about how many people helped me to get where I ended up. And many of them people of color, many of them didn't even know me. And their leadership skills that rubbed off on me, I think helped me through my whole career. Now, move forward to my retirement and from the Navy. I couldn't even spell entrepreneur, much less be one. But I was lucky enough to have a bride that was in her heart an entrepreneur. And when I was getting ready to retire, we talked about it. I had 2 small children. Small, I mean, one baby and one just over baby. Anyway, I really didn't want to go back to sea and back on sea duty. I wanted to be with them. And Lisa, started a vending business. This is while I'm still in the Navy, working 10, 11 hours a day. She started a vending business, carrying the kids around in their car seats in the back of an old Cherokee. Back then it wasn't old, but a Cherokee, setting up accounts and even starting to service some of them. So when I retired, I fell right into that. We bought a van, then we bought a big truck, and we ended up with, oh gosh, I think probably close to 40 accounts, some of them really big. We had one that had just under 300 employees, had to go there every day. We worked our butts off, but it paid good. We had a 33% profit margin. I mean, for every nickel for every penny we invested, we got 30 cents back. And it worked out really well. It was all her. Since I met her, she loved the Navy, but she also realized that it was time to go. And we still miss the Navy community up here. She reminds me of that every now and then, and that, we look at pictures and think about things that we did, and the dining ins and the dining outs and the camaraderie and all that stuff. She kind of misses it, but she's got, my life is what it is because of her.
So you're a lucky man is what you're saying.
Beyond lucky.
Yeah. And because if you look back what you just said about how everybody helped you along the way, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. If you're in the Navy and you work any service and you do a good job, people are trying to help you all the way and help you along. I got helped a lot when I was in, and especially when I didn't have the mentors like my dad. I didn't have a dad at the time. I didn't have any of those people to help me. So for them to help me, it was amazing. And your story is really, so I just have a question in between. So when you went from enlisted to officer, did you go to like an OCS school? Did you do anything, or is it just No,
it's an in-service procurement program. And it's, like I say, it's limited duty officer, but you're really not limited on anything other than you can't serve as a commanding officer of a carrier or a naval station or anything like that. But in all other ways, but the selection process, again, I was helped. A helo pilot that I worked for, I was in Bermuda, and a helo pilot I worked for over there called me in one day, and I'm going, what do you want? And at the time, I was a CPO, I was chief, and he said, Petty Officer Brown, I'm going to put you in for the LDO program. And I'm going, well, I knew what an LDO was, and I'm going, okay. And he put me in for it. I did all the interviews and stuff and was selected. I think that was 1976 or 77. I don't remember exactly. I'm getting old. And then it just went on from there. I worked for great people the whole time. A couple of guys that weren't so great, but for the most part, they taught me that if you take care of your troops, if you take care of your sailors, they're going to take care of you. And I think that's where a lot of times veterans have a problem making the conversion to 4 or 8 years in the military and then coming into the civilian world, is that there's some cutthroat stuff in the Navy or in the military. But for the most part, the good leaders know that if you're not happy, if you're not satisfied, if you can't see a way to excel, to grow, then you're not going to support them. And if you don't give your whole in supporting them, then they're not going to do very well. And one of the things that I was faced with when I got out, after we got out of the vending business, was I went to work for a couple of corporations, and I did okay. Got into sales, and I found out that I had a knack with it because, I was always in the Navy. I was always in a support category. Like I ran the jet engine repair facility in the Philippines, had 350 people working with me, and we repaired all of jet engines, turbojet engines, for the whole Western Pacific. And I had a great master chief, and he always kept me calm because I was kind of a flamer. But he kept me calm, and we stayed on the right path. And the guys, for the most part, loved working there. It was, and I loved having them work there. So you learn that kind of thing in the Navy or in the military. What your troops do makes a difference on how you do, how you do. And that's not always the attitude of corporations if you go to work in a corporate, in a corporate environment. But the other thing the military does for you is makes you learn how to adapt and overcome. And I think that's probably one of the best lessons that I brought out of the military, was that take care of your people that work with you, and when there's a problem, you identify the problem, you change, adapt however you can to take care of it, and you go forward. And veterans have to understand that quality is really the most important thing that they bring to the table. It's not your technical knowledge. It's not anything else. It's your leadership ability and your ability to recognize a problem, figure out a solution, and overcome. Does that make any sense?
I'm sorry?
I said, does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes total sense to me. I mean, I'm a vet, so I totally understand that. It upsets my staff when I see an issue and then I want to change the system we have to make it work better because I found a problem. And they're like, we're changing again? It's like, yeah, because we're going to make it better.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're making it easier for you to work, to find a solution, to get the job done.
We did have a comment while you were talking about, there was a Lucas Marino. He went through the similar process, but through OCS. He must, went in, enlisted, and then came, but not in the 70s, he said.
Well, when was he in?
It didn't say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's younger in the picture, so I assume it's the later, like the 2000s, Yeah.
That's what I would guess.
Yeah.
I think it got easier and harder, as everything does.
Right.
I mean, it changes how you go about that stuff. But I still think that, any veteran that does well in the military can get out into civilian life, and there's a niche out there for him, that he can showcase the skills that he learned in the military. I'm going to say something that's probably not all that popular. Nixon got elected when he ran for president on his position on the draft. This is right after Johnson and Vietnam and all that stuff. Well, Nixon got us out of Vietnam, but he was going to do away with the draft. And I'm not being political here, but I really think that that's probably been more harmful to our youth, especially to lower middle class, lower middle class, and so on, because it gave them an opportunity to draft, even though people die. But the draft put them in situations where they learn leadership, they learn a skill, they learn whether it was technical or dealing with people, they learn that. And today, I guess I'm an old man, but today it seems like that if you can't afford to go to a particular school, that it takes you a long time to learn it. Whereas in the military, you could learn it in 2 to 4 years, at least see it working and reap some benefits from it. But anyway, sorry.
No, I totally agree, because I learned so much when I was in. My son's in the Army. It wasn't like he had to go in. He could have done anything he wanted to, but he wanted to be a medic, wanted to go on to be a nurse, but he wanted to go jump out of airplanes for a while before that happened, right? He's airborne. So
That's a scary thing, but
not if you're a snowboarder.
yeah, I guess. The one thing I never wanted to do when I was flying as a crewman was have to jump out.
I don't understand it either. I don't want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. So
I'd rather even come in without any wheels than to jump out. But I mean, there's guys that do that for a living, so I guess it's like everything else, you get used to it.
All right. So now I looked at your service taught you a lot of things. That's what we're hearing. That's what you're trying to explain to a lot of people is, and I agree. I don't know about the draft part of it. I do agree that people should join. I tried to get my daughter to join. Of course, she's too anti whatever, that one area where there's no way I'm going to service, but you don't understand. You don't know what it is unless you go in. And Lucas did say that we had many intangibles in the service, but he actually enlisted in 98 and he got out in 2019. So we were right on there with that 2000s. Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Amy. You got a question?
Well, I was going to say just about kind of the draft. I think we could do it better. Like, I think we could have a service component. I have a son who has epilepsy, and so he would never, even if it was a draft, he would not be sent out. But I do think it would be cool to do. He could serve in a hospital. He could serve in an orphanage. He could serve, and so I do feel like the service piece could be a really neat thing that we do, but maybe we just do it differently. We don't call it a draft, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's other implications for it. And if we allowed for other opinions, it might be something very beautiful for the country.
Oh, yes, definitely. Lisa's cousin, who's like a sister to me, their child is fairly high up on the autistic scale, and but he has so many other skills. He has a small business. He mows yards. I think they sound. Christina was looking at his mom was looking at his room, and from mowing the yards and stuff, he had several $1,000s stashed in his drawer. They all paid him in cash. It's amazing. I mean, and he's such a matter of fact, Lisa did a show with him. You guys might look that up, talk to her about it, and look at it. But he was on the show, and he's a marvelous young man. We all have problems. We all have. None of us are perfect, and we have to look at other people and through eyes of what they can do to help, what we can do to help. If we do that, I think we can utilize the skills of people that aren't like us. But when I say aren't like us, I mean they don't have the same whatever as we do, and we have a tendency to, if someone's not like us, we have a tendency to kind of draw back a little bit and not see the person rather than whatever the problem, not problem, but whatever the difference is. I'm kind of wandering.
No,
sorry.
You're good. No, you're good. All right. So I want to go back to, all right. So looking back, I know you did talk a lot about things, but what is the one thing that you still use to this day that you learned in the Navy?
I think probably problem solving. I think if you if if you learn in a position that there is a problem. We had a when I took over the jet shop in QB Point in the Philippines. I had a E5 come to me and say, our helicopter engine repair shop is putting out garbage. And he was a Marine, by the way, worked for me. And so I said, take me through it. And he was right. They had a bunch of spare parts back there and no idea whether they were good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. Every third engine we put on the test cell to run failed. And so therefore we were falling way, way, way behind the fleet's need because, we had, between the small boys and the carriers, we had like 35 ships out there and hundreds of airplanes, and therefore a lot of helicopters. Anyway, so I went to my boss and said, we got to shut this thing down until we figure out what's going on and figure out what's good and what's bad. Because the last thing in the world an H2 or an H3, H2 in the middle of the Indian Ocean needs is to need an engine change, put the engine in, and it doesn't work. You turn it up on the back end of a frigate, and it just sputters. So we were shut down for 11 days. Well, you talk about some heat. We were getting heat out of Comnever Pack in San Diego, out of Hawaii, everybody, all over us. And thank goodness I had a boss and a CO. He was a fighter pilot. His nickname was Flamin' Jake Buchanan. And I don't know, maybe he'll hear this, but he was a flamer. So he called my boss and me into his office and said, tell me what's going on. And I laid it out for him. And he said, no problem. I'll call AirPack. We're good to go. And we took care of the problem. And so I don't even know why I got started on that story. But no, whatever the problem is or however big it is, there's a solution. There's a solution. You might not be able to mitigate everything. You might not be able to take care of everything, but you can make it better. And that's the way you have to look at things. I think in life, in business, everywhere. You look at it that way. It's not perfect. We broke something. We're going to work to fix it and go forward.
The reason you got on that story is because I asked you what did you learn in the Navy, and you said problem solving. So you told us that story, just so you know.
And that's probably the biggest thing, because you guys know. Yeah. I mean, you've been there. You got a company of men. You've got a platoon of men. Yeah, you've got a brigade of men. You got all kind of problems wherever you are. It might be a mechanical problem. It might be a personnel problem, whatever. But you have to learn that the solution is one step at a time. You take care of the problem and move on.
Okay, I have a question. You said you were a flamer, and you said this gentleman was a flamer. So at first I thought you meant hothead, but I think you mean
no. I meant a flaming.
All right, that's the difference between then and now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm older.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's different time.
Yeah. But I always had people to keep me in check. I had a master chief that worked for me in Kibbe Point. That was, I mean, he'd come out at the time. I was a 03, a lieutenant, and in the Navy, and he'd see me boiling over, and he'd say, "Lieutenant, come on in the office." I'd go in there, and he said, "Lieutenant, you've got to bring it down about 2 notches." He said, "It's the water's boiling." And I go, "Yeah, you're right, Master Chief. I'll back it down." But we all need people like that. I mean, there are hotheads like me. I don't know if hothead's the right word, but I can flame. And there are people that are calm, cool, and collected all the time. And I think the world, you kind of need both people, because you can't be calm, calm, cool, and collected doesn't always get things done. Neither does pulling your hair out and blowing something up get things done. So it's a matter of understanding leadership, knowing where you excel in leadership, where you are lacking in leadership, and that's a great thing about the military. If you're overzealous, somebody is going to recognize that and either calm you down or kick you out. And if you're laissez-faire, somebody's going to recognize that and say, better step it up a notch. And I think business is like that. I learned one thing. I learned in the military that I think every veteran can take to the civilian world, is that you look at your customers. And in my case, our customers in the Philippines were aircraft carriers and aircraft, and in Vietnam, flying airborne early warning, it was the jet pilots that were going in and out of dropping bombs and stuff. It was we were a service organization, and our customers were those pilots that if they came out dinged up and had to punch out within sight or a couple of miles of the shoreline, they wanted to know that somebody knew where they were and would spot boats coming after them. And in a jet shop, our customers were the pilots, the mechanics on the helicopters and the jets and stuff out there flying missions, getting catted off. So even in the military, you have customers. We were customers of the Naval Air NADEP, the repair facilities in the States. So everybody has a customer, and if you in the military, in your infantry, you have customers too. You have people you're trying to protect. You have, everything goes downhill or uphill. If you understand that the people you're supporting have to be taken care of, then you transfer that over to civilian life and understand that whatever you're doing, whether you're putting together a podcast, whether you're building air conditioners, whether you're coming out pumping out septic tanks, you can only survive if your customer is taken care of. And that's one of the things I brought from the military, is that the people that you're supporting, whether it be your troops, whether it's an aircraft carrier, whatever, if you don't take care of them, you're out of business. And it's the same in the civilian world. And I think the military, at least it taught me that you look on your customers as they're people you have to take care of. if you sell them something, if you sell them insurance, if you sell them a house, if you sell them a car, they put their money in your pocket, and they believe in you, they trust you, and you have to take care of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is, I've never heard anybody think of the military that they had customers till now, which it's totally makes sense. I mean, I totally get your it's so basically what you learn is how to take care of people. So when you get out, you know how to take care of people. That's why a lot of vets are really good entrepreneurs. They're good at, what we do, loans, we do other stuff, because that's what they know how to take care of. They want to take care of the people that they take care of, right? And so before we keep going, I want to add one. Matt, I guess he couldn't put down his damn phone, instead, just lay there. He's like, great attitude, break, fix, move on, right? And then he's like, boom, when you said something else. And let's see here. It's like, put the phone down, Matt. Get rid of the rest of it. No. Anyway, so he says you need to come to Naval X. So what Matt does is he's at Naval X, and he does major podcasts. He does a lot of stuff for them, and he would like you to come there and talk to them. So we'll get you guys hooked up afterwards.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to. We went to the Veterans Fair at Fort Belvoir in Washington last weekend, and had a ball. There were a whole bunch of exhibits and everything, and a lot of people that Lisa knows from, online and everything. So anyway, it was a ball. It was. I enjoyed that because you can tell. You can really tell the difference from someone that has served and people that haven't. And I know that sounds
truth. It sounds true. Keep going. We got it. You don't have to say anymore. We all know it.
You can tell. You really can. And I don't want to play down civilian life, because I want all the veterans to be able to get out there and do something worthwhile for them, and it's going to include other people. So I want them all. But the one thing I did miss when I left the military was the camaraderie and the understanding that just because I'm an 03 or 04, that E1 or E2 down there is just as important to the system as I am. I mean, without them, we don't fly airplanes. We don't sail ships. So, it's a simple process. You take care of your people, you take care of your customers, and you go forward.
And so you thought you had nothing to share.
But that's common knowledge. I mean, everybody knows that. You guys know that.
But we all served. So, the thing is not everybody knows that. I mean, they don't, or even if we do, it's nice to hear it again and remind us of that. Remember, this is the reason. Your transition story, your life, what does it have? It helps other people understand because somebody might see this and go, you know what? I want to go in the Navy now, or I want to go in. No, not the Army. I want to go in.
No, that's not nice. That's not nice.
My son's in the Army. I can do that. All right. It's not like he's going to be a Marine like Mohawk.
Boy, I love the Marines. The Marines, when we were quick side story. You got time?
Right. Hey, that's your hour.
Okay. In July, it was a relatively new base. And the Marines, I think it was MAG 12 and MAG 13.
Hold on before I go anymore. So that's in Vietnam, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just to set the stage. What year was this?
It was
67, 68, 66?
67, 68. Well, it was 67 because Ted of 60, I'll tell you that story in just a second. But yeah, it was in 67. And it was the Marines had the security. That was before the Army took over, and they had MAG 12 and MAG 13. A MAG is a Marine Air Group.
Okay.
And Mag 12 was F4s, Mag 13 was A4s, and they flew in and out of make strikes in and out of Chulai. Anyway, we've gotten a period there where we're having mortar and rocket attacks about every other night, and so we only saw it every other night anyway, because we flew at night. We take off at about 17:30, 5:30 in the evening, and go fly up and down the coast and around the Gulf of Tonkin, and then come back in the morning. A couple of times we came back and we had to go to Da Nang because there was holes in the runway. Anyway, the Marines brought a group in. The air group brought a group of grunts in, green grunts, and they went out into the boonies there, and for a couple of months we didn't have any more problems. So I have a lot of respect for Marines. They put everything on the line every time they stick a helmet on and grab an M16 or whatever they're using now. But yeah, I like them.
Yeah. Well, and as a corpsman, that's what I was connected to, was the Marine Corps, right? And it was so funny when I first got it. I had no idea that they were a Department of the Navy, right? Or any of that kind of stuff. It's like you don't. I didn't. Yeah, you laugh. You almost threw up, right? And so, I mean, I was a redneck out of Turlock. I had no idea. My dad was, so deal with it. Right. And I finally figured it out by watching a game, and I'm like going, oh, so one's going to go to the Marine Corps and one's going to the, Naval, the Academy game. Right. And you're like, oh, one's going to the Navy, one's going to the Marine Corps. Oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
I wasn't that smart when I was younger. Okay. Much smarter now.
I had a friend that was a staff sergeant in Mac 13, which I think was the A4s. It's been 100 years ago, but he was in Mag 13, and I ran into him again when I was leaving my third school in Memphis. He was back. He was aviation also, going back there for school. Anyway, I was talking to him about some people we knew, and he was there for Tet of 68, which was a nasty time. They had, he brought pictures back of the revetments and the A4s and the F4s that were there. And just blown to, it was bad. But anyway, I don't know why I brought that up.
You were telling your story.
Yeah, a lot of bad things there. But the Marines there were great to us in Chulai. We'd come in, like I say, we would fly from Guam to Sangley Point, Philippines, and then load up for fuel, go and fly a barrier in Vietnam, up and down Vietnam, and then stay there for 2 weeks, and then go back the same route. Well, our crew chief, one of our crew chiefs, said, those guys over there in the NCO club and the enlisted club, they're drinking National Bohemian beer, which had preservative in it from sometime in the Korean War, and it was awful. So every time we fly in from Sangley Point, we'd have. This is probably not something anybody else needs to know, but anyway,
they can't come after you now.
Yeah, cases of San Miguel beer, Filipino San Miguel beer, which was delicious, and especially for guys that had been drinking National Bohemian that went away even before then. And we brought in cases of that. Once we had a velvet portrait painted in the Philippines of a Playboy Playmate. They hung that in the NCO club, and it was probably there until we left. Until our forces pulled out. But they were a great bunch of guys. they deserved everything we could give them.
Right. And a little different when people are in the sandbox now where you can't do anything, right? Versus when you were in Vietnam and stuff. And each time we're in a war and it's different, it's a little bit harder for each of our, service people to handle what was going on. And, so during where you're at, it was, you had the small little things that we have the beer, we have this, and before the show, we were talking about MASH. And then I think, Amy, you said you were stationed at?
Yeah, I was stationed at, MASH 4077, which is now called Camp Humphreys. And so at the medical spot, they have a big picture of the original cast members signed by them.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. So it was always really interesting, fun to call home. It was 27 numbers to call home. It was so hard back then, which was a luxury for you. You probably didn't get a call home very much at all. And nowadays we have cell phones, so there's tons of changes. But I will say one funny thing. I got one number off. Took me 20 minutes of talking to this woman because I said, "Hi, Mom." So then I finally realized that I didn't know how to stop the conversation, that this was not my mom. So then I finally get off the phone with her and I call my parents, like I do the whole thing. And I said, "Is Jane Crapo there?" Because my maiden name's Crapo. And my dad's like, "How dare you? Your mom has earned the right to be called Mom."
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had an uncle of mine died in Korea, and that was another nasty war. I mean, all wars are nasty, but I mean, that was,
that was a bad one.
If we could do away with politicians, we'd be in good shape.
Yeah, that's the problem, right there. We can't. Unfortunately, maybe we had term limits. They would be much better. They wouldn't have to be forever.
Term limits.
Yeah. Keep the politicians, just have term limits.
Term limits. And
if presidents have to have term limits, everybody else should have to have term limits.
Everybody else should have term limits, because I mean, it's like, it's a way of life. It becomes a way of life to those people. You see them on TV and they have, I don't want to get into politics.
All right, let's move on.
One last thing. They have lost total touch with reality. After 6 or 7, after 20, 30 years in Congress or in the Senate, or they just lose total touch with reality.
With their constituents.
I won't say anymore. I'm sorry.
That's fine. No, they have lost. They don't know where they've come from. They forgot where they came from. So we need to have term limits. That's a totally different story. We can have that. We could go on for hours and hours. And
days with that. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing I want to bring up differently, we're talking about calling home, because when I was in the boot camp, I had to use the payphone, right?
Yes.
And I was at RTC NTC, right? I was one of the last classes through them. And my son, they had freaking cell phones in boot camp.
Oh yeah, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, are you kidding?
I mean, if my child was there, I'd love it. But yeah, I mean, you had a certain lot of time, right? You had to go wait in line for a payphone.
Yep.
And if, God forbid, you were the last person in line, the chances are you were going to have to be somewhere before you got there. It was, and I went through boot camp with a couple of guys that were married. And it was, they were miserable. It was like, I haven't talked to my wife in 3 weeks. Anyway. But,
they should be happy. Anyway.
Hey, be nice.
Hey, it was back then when you're younger. Sometimes it's good to be away from your wife or vice versa. So
I hated boot camp. I was a Florida boy. And
where you stationed? Where'd you go to boot camp?
Great Lakes, Illinois.
Oh, so sorry. I was saying, yeah.
In December.
I had the same problem. I was in San Diego in December, which doesn't sound bad, but when you're out when you only have your dungarees and your shirt and no jacket at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's, wet, cold, it's, at least in Great Lakes, they make you wear stuff, right?
Well, so, you have your undress blues and your pea coat, and that's all.
Yeah. Well, back then it must have been even worse because you had the real wool and you had all the other, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Lisa,
At Fort Drum, they actually had to come out with a mandate that said you couldn't force us to do PT when it was below -20 because it caused instant nosebleeds.
Is there a
You know, whatever.
is
Well,
there a
you know.
difference between -10 and -20? There's not. When your nose runs
There's not.
at -10, when your nose runs, it freezes. At -20, when your nose runs, it freezes. The only difference is how quick it freezes. But what's the difference between that long and that long? I was on the accident board for a helicopter we lost in Brunswick, Maine, outside of Brunswick, Maine, working up on a cruiser up there, and they lost it in the north of Brunswick. I'd say probably 60 miles inland on a hilltop. Everybody got out, but it was we did the investigation anyway. We came up with a reason and all that stuff, but we went up there on an accident investigation, and we had a van up there, and went up, and it was about I'd say 18 degrees, 20 degrees, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to get that carcass off the hilltop back to Brunswick. And I had a friend that I was stationed with aboard America, and he was on the crash and smash crew up there. And we were kicking it around. We're going to have to bring a sky crane, the Sikorsky sky crane in to lift it out, all that stuff. And he said, "There's a cold front coming." And we all looked at him. And we said, "So?" He said, "No, there's a cold front coming." He says, "If you can wait 3 days for that cold front to move in, we can get a truck up there." And this is through a bog, right? It goes down through, I don't know if you guys have been to Maine, but they have these areas where there's hills and stuff, and there's bogs underneath them, and wet bogs. He says, "If you can wait 3 days, we can take a truck up there." And I looked at him and I said, "What the hell are you talking about? That's a swamp almost." And he said, "No, believe me." And I knew he was crash and smash on America with me. So, he's a sharp guy. And anyway, so we waited 3 days. Damn if he wasn't right. We drove 2 flatbeds up there, right up that mountain. It was frozen solid. I mean, like that. It would take a flatbed with a helicopter on it. It would hold that up. And it got down to 21 below. When you went outside, if your face mask on, if your nose ran, your face mask would freeze to your nose. It was that cold. It was horrible. And I'm a Florida boy. I was stationed bad places like Guam and Vietnam and Philippines, stuff like that. I love warm. I'm from Florida. Warm weather is, I think flip-flops, a t-shirt and shorts is dressed up any place you want to go. Boy, that was cold. I don't ever want to be back in that again. The other quick story, and I'll leave you alone with my stories. We came back from Vietnam the last time, flew out of Cam Ranh, the air base, and we were flying back on charters. They use charter aircraft to fly us back and forth. So it went from Cam Ranh to Alaska, to Adak. No, not Adak. I don't know. I forget the city. But anyway, went to Alaska. So here you've got the poor flight attendants. They've got this double wide thing, and you got like 6 seats in the center and 2 seats on either side. All these guys coming back from Vietnam, and of course we were all anxious to get back. And the stop was in Alaska, and it was so funny because we were allowed to disembark there to go to the terminal and get coffee, drinks, whatever. So it was funny because we're all in, we had flying civilian clothes, and the most we had on were short sleeve shirts and khakis, right? And this line with the boarding ladder, people are going down and turning back around and coming right back up. It's like 28 degrees in Alaska after coming out of a year in sultry hot weather. It was not pretty. We used every blanket on that airplane, on that aircraft, to wrap around us and go into the terminal. Of course, they didn't have any buses out there or anything to go to the terminal, but
so basically you had to go down the stairs.
Yeah, we went down the stairs and walked to the terminal. Anyway.
Not like now where we're used to just getting into the terminal and not going down the stairs.
Yeah, no.
All right.
But anyway, it was funny. Funny now, wasn't funny then. I wanted a beer.
Tom, I appreciate you telling your stories today. We really appreciate it.
Well, I hope I didn't bore anybody, or I don't think I told any tall tales. So
now let me see if I can find that one little statement I was looking for.
Uh-oh.
No, it was not a bad one. Oh, right here. I'll give you Matt's number. You can call him.
He's got a problem. Hey, I do want to say one thing real quick. Is that
everything's real quick with you, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, no. I just say that. But my bride is a true entrepreneur, and she took us, and I think I told a little bit of the story, but she took us from the military to civilian life. I mean, it was smooth. Not necessarily smooth up here for me, but the actual transformation from military to civilian was pretty doggone smooth. And she deserves all the credit. She really does. So if you get a chance to talk to her, don't tell her I said that.
You won't. We won't even tell you it's recorded. And we won't use it against you. We'll cut that out for her so she can play it all the time for you. All right. So I know we've been here for about 58 minutes or whatever, but I want to ask this question. So basically what you're telling me is when you get out of the service, you need to have that supportive person to help you through that process.
Yes.
Now, just here, I'm going to say this for you for a second. Real quick, can you tell me, was there an issue when you got out? Did you miss that that sense of purpose? Did you have that when you got out, or did it take a while to get that back? You know what I mean? Like, because when you're in the Navy, you know what you're doing all that kind of stuff.
Well, with the business that she set us up with, there wasn't time for that. And I think that's the real thing, is that if you go from busting your ass to busting your ass, the transition becomes easier. Excuse my language.
That's okay. This is not radio. We're okay. And busting ass is not that bad.
But I owe it all to Lisa, really.
Yeah. All right. So basically what you're saying is so we have another person who's part of the show, Chloe, who's on here, and she's huge about her people transitioning, knowing what you're going to do a year out before you get out. You retired. So yeah, you had your pension but you still needed to do something, not just sit around and do something. So having that set up, what Lisa's set up for you, and your wife is amazing. We all know her. So you should, when you get done here, go out there, give her a hug and a kiss and tell her thank you again for what she did for you. Because we're only as good as the women in our life. I'm only as good as my wife helps me out a lot, supports. Don't tell her this either. Hopefully she's not watching, because she'll use it against me when we go to dinner tonight. But yeah, our wives, are so important to us.
Well, and I'd have to say spouses, because my husband is definitely huge for me. So
I don't think it makes any difference. I think you support one another. just like the military. You got somebody beside you in a foxhole. You got somebody sitting in the cockpit next to you. You're there to help one another. And
Just
you do it.
hopefully you're not kissing them. Sorry. That's the difference, right? Your spouse is really important to you. That's a totally different. And I get what you're saying about the person next to you in the foxhole, the support. Well, you need that person, but you also need the spouse that's there for the other emotional part. Yeah.
I would have been lost without her. And she loves the Navy. She misses it as much as I do. We moved to Virginia. She didn't experience it for very long, but she loved it. Sometime, if you're talking to her sometime, get her to show you some of the pictures of dining ins and dining outs and stuff, or dining outs with the military for the full blown dress uniform. She loved that stuff. And that was so amazing to me, because I've known so many military spouses that just didn't like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's an amazing person. If you ever get a chance to talk to her again.
Don't worry. She's part of our group. We'll talk to her all the time.
Okay. Yeah. Don't tell her I said that, because she'll get a big head.
We won't. And again, Tom, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. We really appreciate it. And if anybody's listening to this, I'm just going to get this out real quick. Listening to this on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe, share, and like. Amy, thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Can I get that in writing?
I didn't hear what you just said.
I said, can I get that in writing?
Nice meeting you and talking to you.
I want in writing. He said, thank you. It was nice meeting you. Sorry.
It was nice meeting you too, sir.
Sure. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Tom. If there's anything we can ever do for you, or if you'd like to get involved with us, helping us out, let us know. All right.
Well, anytime you need, if you need anything for, like the veterans thing we went to last weekend or whatever, just touch base with Lisa, and I'll be glad to help out in any way I can.
We're just looking for more people to come on and share their stories, especially, for me, I want to, every time I'm out in public, I walk across, I don't care how far it is, to say thank you for your service. And by the way, Tom, thank you for your service. Especially the Vietnam and back, because they were not treated as well as we are now. My son says, Dad, I love it when I walk through the airport, but when it gets to the 110th time, when they say thank you for your service, and you said that he goes, it's a little overwhelming. I really appreciate it, but you get to a point where you're like, oh, geez.
Yeah. The difference is amazing. From the 80s, when you drive across 395 in Philadelphia under the bridge, and a third of the homeless people living down there were veterans. It breaks your heart, but I'm glad that we came around.
Yeah.
Or the people did.
And they still need help to this day, especially female veterans. Homeless is huge. There's a lot of veterans out there that need our help. So we're here to help any veteran at all. If you ever need anything, just find us through Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever we're at, we're here to help. And again, thank you all. And everybody, thank you for sharing today and watching.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Stay right there, you two. All right. And everybody else, thank you so much. And we'll be here again on Tuesday at 3:30 Pacific and 6:30 Eastern. So Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thanks again.